In the spring of 1932, a body of a man was discovered near Webster, Wisconsin. He had been shot in the head. His name was Arthur Dunlap, and only days earlier, he had been traveling with Kate "Ma" Barker and her son, Fred Barker and Alvin Karpis. Historical accounts would identify Fred and Karpis as the men responsible. But why would the men closest to Ma Barker want her companion dead? Arthur Dunlap had been part of Ma Barker's life before the Barker-Karpis gang became nationally infamous. By 1931, Ma and Dunlap were living together around Thayer, Missouri, when Fred Barker reunited with Alvin Karpis, a man he had known in prison. Dunlap began moving with them, placing himself inside an increasingly dangerous world. Fred and Karpis were committing robberies, changing names, moving from town to town, and trying to stay ahead of the law. After the killing of Sheriff C. Roy Kelly in Missouri in December 1931, the group fled north and eventually reached St. Paul, Minnesota. St. Paul had an unusual reputation during this period. For years, corrupt officials and police had allowed criminals to use the city as a sanctuary under an official arrangement. Behave while you were in St. Paul. Keep major crimes outside of the city, and authorities might look the other way. Fred and Karpis needed exactly what St. Paul appeared to offer, a place where they could disappear. They settled into a rented house under assumed names, while Ma Barker and Arthur Dunlap remained with them. To neighbors, the group could look surprisingly ordinary. That appearance was valuable. An older woman and her companion helped make Fred and Karpis look less like wanted criminals hiding from the law and more like members of an ordinary household. For the arrangement to work, however, nobody could discover who Fred Barker and Alvin Karpis really were. As long as their identities remained secret, St. Paul could provide the gang the time and security they needed. Then someone recognized them. The son of a woman who owned the house, Nick Hanegraaff, reportedly came across the photographs of Fred and Karpis in an issue of True Detective Mysteries. The men living nearby under assumed names were wanted criminals. Hanegraaff contacted police, but before authorities could close in, the gang received a warning and escaped. Fred and Karpis now knew that someone had exposed their hiding place, and suspicion apparently fell on Arthur Dunlap. Dunlap had a reputation within the group for drinking and talking too much, and Karpis later made that clear that he did not particularly like him. But there was an important problem with their suspicion. The person known to have recognized Fred and Karpis was Hanegraaff. Whether Dunlap had officially revealed anything, accidentally talked while drinking, or had nothing whatsoever to do with their discovery remains uncertain. Not long after the gang fled St. Paul, Arthur Dunlap disappeared. His body was found near Webster, Wisconsin, with a gunshot wound to the head. Historical accounts of the Barker-Karpis gang identify Fred Barker and Alvin Karpis as responsible for his death. Dunlap had gone from traveling beside Ma Barker to being killed by the very men traveling with her. And this is where the story becomes more complicated than the legend that later developed around Ma. There is no solid evidence that she ordered Dunlap killed, helped plan his murder, or even knew beforehand what Fred and Karpis intended to do. Yet after Dunlap was gone, Ma continued traveling with Fred and the gang. What happened after Dunlap's murder would eventually become far more famous than the murder itself. The Barker-Karpis gang continued committing robberies and later became involved in the kidnappings of William Ham and Edward Brimmer. Those crimes brought enormous attention from federal investigators and helped make the Barker-Karpis name notorious across the country. Ma herself would later be portrayed as the ruthless mastermind who controlled her sons and directed the gang, but former gang members disputed that image, and the evidence for her actually planning their crimes is weak. Arthur Dunlap was already dead before most Americans had ever heard the name Ma Barker. Yet, his death raises one of the most interesting questions about her relationship with the criminals surrounding her. What did Fred tell his mother about the disappearance of the man that she had been living with? Did Ma know Dunlap had been murdered? Did she accept whatever explanation her sons gave her? Or did she understand exactly what happened and continue traveling with Fred anyway? The surviving record does not give us a clear answer. And perhaps that uncertainty tells us more about the real Ma Barker than the later stories of a criminal mastermind could ever. So what do you think? When Arthur Dunlap disappeared, how much did Ma Barker really know? Thank you all for liking the video and subscribing to the channel. If you would like to write us a letter At the address listed here, we will write you back with a hand-typed letter from our 1930s Corona 4 typewriter. With that being said, this is the Eclectic Historical Society, and remember, history is lost if it isn't repeated.